Her own people abandoned her, then a human gave her a future. The colony transport dropped out of warp too close to the asteroid field, and the impact alarms were already screaming before the pilot had time to think. Zaravel hit the emergency seal on her cryopod door with 3 fingers at once, the way they trained you never to do unless the ship was literally coming apart. The ship was literally coming apart. She felt the deck plates buckle under her feet as she sprinted toward the escape bay. Around her, her people, the Sorvathi, sleek and silver-skinned, built for cold vacuum and long silence, were moving in organized clusters. Every family unit together, every bonded pair locked at the wrist. That was the Sorvathi way. You survived with your own. You did not look sideways. You did not reach out a hand to a stranger. Zaravel had no family unit. She had no bonded pair. She had been cast aside 6 months before the colony launch, stripped of her bonding contract by a council ruling she had never been told the full reason for. They gave her a bunk on the colony ship because the law required it. They gave her nothing else. She reached the escape bay at the same moment as Elder Kavan, who was 70 years old and still ran like a younger man when the situation called for it. He looked at her. He looked at the bay behind him, where his family, 12 of them, were already strapping into their pods. He looked back at her. He stepped inside and sealed the bay door. The lock engaged with a sound like a bone snapping. Zaravel stood in the corridor with 3 seconds to decide and a ship folding around her like wet paper. She turned and ran the other direction. She did not think. She did not cry. She ran because that was the only thing left to do when everything else had already been taken from you. She found the secondary bay by accident, or maybe by some animal instinct she did not know she had. It was smaller, barely lit, and held 6 pods designed for cargo crew. 5 of them were already gone, blown out by the initial impact rupture. The 6th was sealed from the inside. She hammered on the casing. Nothing. She hit the emergency override panel, and the pod hissed and cracked open to reveal a human male, maybe 30 years old, sitting up with his eyes wide and his hands already reaching out to her before he even understood what was happening. "Get in," he said. "Not get away from me. Not who are you and why are you here. Not the Sorvathi are over there and this pod is mine. Just get in." She got in. He yanked the seal lever, and the pod blew free from the dying ship with a sound like a thunderclap, and the 2 of them were suddenly alone in the dark between stars, breathing each other's air in a space designed for one. His name was Cole Navarro, and he was a cargo logistics specialist, 31 years old, from a place on Earth called New Mexico. He told her this in the first 10 minutes because he seemed to believe that names mattered when things were bad. He asked for hers. She told him. He repeated it carefully, not butchering it the way most non-Sorvathi did, but trying, adjusting, getting close enough that it felt like respect. She did not know what to do with respect. She had not received much of it lately. The pod had enough oxygen for 40 hours and a beacon that was already transmitting. Cole pulled up the nav screen with the calm efficiency of someone who had clearly memorized emergency protocols and actually believed in using them. He ran his calculations quietly, showed her the screen without explaining it condescendingly, and said, "Nearest shipping lane is roughly 32 hours out. If someone is looking for survivors, this is where they will look." "They will not look for me," she said. He glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "The Sorvathi Council handles survivor recovery. They will look for Sorvathi. I am not on any official manifest with standing." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Then, you were on that ship?" "Yes." "Then you are a survivor." "To them, I am an inconvenience." He looked at her for a long moment with those strange flat human eyes, warm-colored and direct in a way Sorvathi eyes never were. Then he turned back to the nav screen and started adjusting the beacon frequency. "I am adding a human distress signal alongside the standard one," he said. "Human rescue services operate independently. They will respond to me, and when they show up, you will be with me." He paused. "If that is acceptable to you." She had not been asked if something was acceptable to her in a very long time. "Yes," she said quietly, "that is acceptable." The pod drifted, and the stars were very bright through the small viewport, and Zaravel, who had been abandoned by her own kind in the middle of a dying ship, sat beside a human she had met 6 minutes ago and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. It took her a little while to recognize it. It was the feeling of not being alone. The rescue was not clean or cinematic. It came in the form of an old mid-range freighter called the Cardenas Run, captained by a woman named Lucy Graves who had forearms like bridge cables, and a voice that sounded permanently unhappy with the universe. She pulled the pod in on a tow line, cracked it open herself, and stared at the two of them with the expression of someone doing a complicated math problem in her head. "One human," she said, "and one," she squinted at Zaravel. "Sorvathi," Cole said. "Right." Lucy stepped back and let them out without further comment, which was either indifference or professionalism, and Zaravel was not sure which she preferred. The Cardenas Run smelled like machine oil and synthetic coffee, and something that might have been engine-scorched metal. It was a working ship with a crew of 7 humans and one Dravathi engineer named Saul, who had 4 arms, and used all of them simultaneously when he was thinking. Saul looked at Zaravel with the tired recognition of someone who understood what it felt like to be the only one of your kind in a room. Cole handled the logistics. He spoke to Lucy, filled out the recovery forms, answered questions about the colony ship disaster with the careful accuracy of someone who understood that official records mattered. He included Zaravel in every answer. He did not once describe her as a passenger he had found or a stowaway he had helped. He described her as a fellow survivor, which was technically correct, and also she was beginning to understand, a choice he was making deliberately. She did not have destination papers. She did not have colony standing anymore. She did not have a legal address in any registered Sorvathi settlement, because her bonding contract cancellation had also stripped her of her residential claim. She had explained this to Cole in the pod during hour 17, when the oxygen was getting a little thin, and she had decided that if she was going to die, she would at least do it honestly. Cole had listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he had said, "Okay, what do you want to do? Not what do your people think you should do, not what does the council require. What do you want to do?" She had not had an answer ready. She had been thinking about what others wanted from her for so long that she had nearly lost the ability to want things for herself. "I do not know," she said. "That is fine," he said. "You do not have to know right now." Now, on the Cardenas Run, 3 hours after rescue, she sat in the small galley while the crew moved around her, and Cole explained the situation to Lucy in a voice low enough to be private, but not so low as to exclude Zaravel from the basic awareness that a conversation was happening. Lucy came and sat across from her when Cole was done talking. She set 2 mugs on the table, pushed one toward Zaravel and said, "That is not coffee. It is a grain-based warm drink and it will not hurt you. I checked the Sorvathi dietary flag before I poured it." Zaravel looked at her. "You looked cold," Lucy said, which was not an explanation so much as a statement of fact. Zaravel wrapped her hands around the mug. "Where is this ship going?" "Vila Station, 3-day run. It is a crossroads post, shipping, trade, a few embassies, a labor market." Lucy watched her. "You have options there if you want them." "What kind of options?" "Work, legal registration under independent settler status if you qualify. The Vila Charter is not affiliated with any homeworld council, which means your people cannot pull standing claim jurisdiction on you there." Lucy paused. "Cole mentioned your situation." Zaravel glanced toward the corridor where Cole had gone. "He did not have to do that." "No," Lucy agreed. "He did it anyway." "Why?" Lucy shrugged with one shoulder. The casual human gesture that Zaravel was beginning to understand meant something more complicated than indifference. Because he wanted to, because he thinks people deserve a fair start. She picked up her own mug. "He is that kind of person, Some people are. Zaravel had not grown up around people like that. The Sorvathi were not cruel exactly. They were ordered. They valued function and alignment and the smooth running of the collective. A person who did not fit into the prescribed structure was not hated, they were simply deprioritized, set aside like a broken tool. The assumption was always that the person had failed the structure, not that the structure had failed the person. She had spent 6 months accepting that assumption. Cole reappeared in the galley doorway, looked at the 2 mugs, and raised an eyebrow at Lucy. Lucy pointed to a 3rd mug on the counter. He got it, sat down, and the 3 of them were quiet together for a moment in the way that people sometimes are when they have all been through something, even if they have been through different parts of it. "I need to learn the independent settler process," Zaravel said finally. Lucy nodded. "I have the Vila charter documents on the ship system. I will send them to your reader if you have one." "I do not." "Cole," Lucy said. Cole pulled a flat reader from his jacket pocket and set it on the table without comment, as though he had been holding it specifically for this moment, which he possibly had. Zaravel looked at it, then she picked it up. "I will review the documents," she said, "and I will find a way to be useful on this ship for the duration of the journey." "You do not have to earn your passage," Cole said. "I know," she looked at him steadily. "I want to." He accepted that the way she was learning humans sometimes did, not by insisting or over-explaining, but by simply nodding, as though her wanting something was a sufficient and complete reason for it to matter. She spent the next 3 hours reading every word of the Vila Charter. She was a qualified environmental systems technician. That was her training, the career she had built before the council ruling dismantled her life. She found the relevant clause in the charter on page 41 and read it 4 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Under independent settler certification, a Sorvathi environmental systems technician with verified credentials and 3 references could apply for provisional work status within 48 hours of arrival. She had credentials. They were in the colony ship's personnel files, which were maintained separately from the manifest and had not been voided by the council ruling because the council had not thought to do it. They were still valid. She needed 3 references. She looked up from the reader. Cole was 2 seats away, working through something on his own screen. Saul, the engineer, was in the doorway, leaning against the frame with 2 of his 4 arms crossed, apparently just existing near people the way some beings did. "I have a question," Zaravel said. Both of them looked at her. "I need 3 professional references for a work certification application," she said. "I do not currently have any. I am aware that we have known each other for a very short time, and I understand if the answer is no." Cole did not hesitate. "Yes." Saul made a sound that translated roughly as "of course. What else would I say?" and used 2 of his arms to gesture agreement. She needed 1 more. She was still thinking about where to find it when Lucy appeared behind Saul, having apparently heard all of this from the corridor. "Send me the form," Lucy said. "I have been running rescue recoveries in this sector for 9 years. My reference will carry weight at Vila." Zaravel sat very still for a moment. 3 strangers on a ship she had never been on before. 3 people who had nothing to gain and no obligation to offer. 3 yesies before she had even finished the question. "Thank you," she said. The words felt thin against what she actually meant. She said them anyway because they were what she had. Cole smiled at her, that particular human expression she was still cataloging, warm and slightly lopsided, more real than a formal acknowledgement. "We arrive in 3 days," he said. "That is enough time to prepare a solid application." She turned back to the reader. There was work to do, real work toward a real future in a place where her people could not reach back and erase her again. For the first time in 6 months, she did not feel like something that had been left behind. She felt like something that was just beginning. Vila Station hung in the middle of the Calrose shipping corridor, like a city someone had decided to build in space, and then kept building until it forgot to stop. It was enormous in the way that accumulation makes things enormous, not designed to be impressive, just grown that way over 200 years of adding a corridor here, a dock ring there, a residential level because someone needed somewhere to sleep. The result was a structure that sprawled across 4 square kilometers of orbital space and smelled, at every pressure-locked entrance, like a different world. Zaravel stood at the observation port as the Cardina's run made its approach and tried to prepare herself. She had her application documents formatted. She had her reference letters, all 3 of them written carefully and specifically, not the vague professional courtesy letters that looked good and meant nothing. Cole had spent an hour on his. He had described her system's certification in accurate technical detail. And then he had added a paragraph about watching her read the Vila Charter for 3 straight hours in the ship galley, adapting her strategy in real time with the focused efficiency of someone who already knew how to build things from the ground up. He had described it as the most impressive professional behavior he had witnessed in a recovery situation. She had read it once, and then she had made herself stop reading it because it was making it difficult to concentrate. Lucy's reference was equally direct. 9 years of recovery work, and she had listed Zaravel's name at the top of a very short list of survivors she had seen handle catastrophe without losing functional clarity. Saul had written his in the formal Dravathi style, which was deeply technical and required 3 footnotes to explain the grading system, but the final assessment translated to something like, exceptional competence, recommend without reservation. The station grew in the viewport until it filled the whole frame. Zaravel watched the dock crews moving against the hull far below, small at this distance, busy with the work of keeping a living place alive. She could do that work. She had been trained for it. She was good at it. For the first time in a long time, those facts felt like a foundation instead of a list of things she had been prevented from using. Cole appeared at her shoulder. He had that quality some people had of moving quietly not because they were trying to be unobtrusive, but because they were simply comfortable enough in their own presence not to need to announce it. "Ready?" he asked. "Nearly," she said. "I keep finding reasons to revise the application." "The application is good. You have not seen the latest revision." "I have seen the 5 before it. They were all good." He stood beside her at the viewport. "You are afraid that good is not enough." She did not answer immediately. "Yes," she said. "That is a reasonable fear," he said. "It does not mean you should keep revising forever. At some point you have to trust the work." She thought about that. "Is that something humans learn, or something some of you are born with?" He laughed, brief and genuine. "Neither. Most of us learn it by doing it wrong a few times and noticing that the world did not end. And if the world does end, then you were right to be nervous, but probably could not have stopped it with one more revision." She turned to look at him. He was watching the station approach with a relaxed attention, the kind that came from having navigated new places enough times that novelty no longer felt like threat. She wanted to ask him something that had been sitting at the back of her mind for 2 days, and she decided that if she was going to trust anything, she might as well start with a direct question. "Why did you open the pod door?" she said. He looked at her. "You were sealed inside. You were safe. You did not know what was outside. You could have waited it out or blown the pod yourself." She held his gaze. "Why did you open it?" Cole was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who does not have an answer, but the quiet of someone choosing which version of the truth to give. "Because I heard someone hitting the door," he said, "and because the only reason I could imagine for someone to be hitting a sealed escape pod door instead of their own was that they had run out of other options." He paused. "I did not think about it very much. I just opened it." "That is not a reason," she said. "That is a description of what happened." He considered this seriously. "I suppose the reason is that when someone is hitting a door in that situation, the right thing to do is open the door. That is all. I did not need a reason beyond that. Zaravel looked back at the viewport. The Sorvathi had a concept for the kind of help that came from obligation, Drevath, the bound duty of a member to their unit. They had a concept for the help that came from calculation, Sorvath, the rational investment in a useful alliance. They did not have a word for what Cole had done, because opening a sealed door for an unknown person with nothing to gain and no obligation to fulfill was not a thing the Sorvathi conceptual framework had been built to describe. She was going to have to find a way to carry that in a language that did not have a word for it yet. The Cardina's run docked at 800 station time. Lucy walked them through the primary entrance herself, using her registered captain's credentials to expedite the intake processing, which she did with the calm authority of someone who had done it many times and knew exactly which lines to stand in and which officers to approach. The Vila intake hall was a cathedral of controlled chaos, beings of a dozen species moving through lanes, officials at glass-fronted desks running documents through readers, a low hum of 100 conversations in 20 languages. Zaravel had been in crowded places before, but always as part of a group, bracketed by the social structure that told everyone around her who she was and where she stood. Here, she was just a person standing in a line. It should have felt worse than it did. The independent settler desk was run by a human woman named Diane who had the look of someone who had processed 10,000 applications and could tell within about 40 seconds whether one was going to be a problem. She took Zaravel's documentation, scanned it, read Lucy's reference, read Cole's reference, read Essal's reference with the footnotes, and then looked up. Environmental Systems, Certification Level 4. Yes, Zaravel said. We have a skills shortage in that area specifically. 3 open postings as of this morning. Diane turned the screen to show her. Provisional status, 48-hour confirmation, standard independent settler terms. If your credentials verify, and they look clean to me, you will have a legal status here inside 2 days. Zaravel looked at the screen. 3 postings. Real postings, with salary scales and contract terms and a line at the top that said applicant rights under Vila Charter, which meant that whoever hired her would be bound by law to treat the terms of her employment as a real agreement between 2 parties with equal standing. I would like to apply, she said. Diane was already pulling up the form. I thought you might. Cole was standing slightly behind her, near enough to be present, far enough back to make clear that this was her moment and not his. She was aware of him the way you become aware of a steady thing, not because it demands attention, but because it is simply and reliably there. By the time the application was submitted, it was mid-morning station time. They emerged from the intake hall into a wide concourse lined with food stalls and shop fronts and a long window that looked out into the black, with Vila's dock ring visible in the far distance and 2 ships leaving it in slow arcs against the stars. What now? Cole asked. Now I wait 48 hours, she said, and find somewhere to stay while I wait. Lucy mentioned a crew hostel near the docking ring, reasonable rate. Yes, I read the charter section on temporary accommodation. She paused. What do you do now? Is your contract situation resolved? He made a small sound that might have been amusement. My contract was with the Colony Shipping Company, which no longer has a ship, so I am technically between assignments. He looked out at the concourse. I was thinking I might stay a few days, see if there is logistics work here. Zaravel looked at him. You are not obligated to stay. I know, he said, with the same simple directness he had used every time she tried to give him a reason to leave. I am choosing to. She thought about the Sorvathi word they did not have. She thought about the door opening in the middle of a dying ship, and 3 letters written carefully by people who had known her for less than 4 days, and a mug of warm grain drink pushed across a table by a woman who checked dietary flags before she poured. She thought about all the ways the world had been different than she expected it to be. Then let us find the hostel, she said. They walked together into the noise and light of Vila Station, and Zaravel did not look behind her once. The confirmation came in 31 hours, not 48. Zaravel was in the hostile common room working through the technical requirements for all 3 posted positions when the notification arrived on the reader Cole had lent her, and which she had resolved to replace with her own as soon as she had an income. She read it twice. Then she looked up at the common room around her, at the mix of species sharing tables and wall screens, and the quiet industry of people between one thing and the next, and she allowed herself to feel it for exactly 10 seconds before she got back to work. She told Cole over dinner in the station market, at a stall that sold something called a pulled pork sandwich, which was not a thing Zaravel could eat but which Cole described as one of the better versions of itself he had encountered in 2 years of freight routes. She had a bowl of the station's standard vegan grain plate, which was nutritionally appropriate if not exactly exciting. "Confirmed status," she said, "effective this morning." Cole set down his sandwich. "Congratulations. I have an interview tomorrow, the 3rd posting the station's own environmental systems team. Direct station employment, not a private contractor." "That is the best one." I know, she had read all 3 thoroughly. The station employment came with a housing stipend, full charter protections, and union standing, which under the Vila system meant she would have representation in any dispute with her employer. It was the kind of structural security that the Sorvathi had always told their members only existed within the bonded collective. It existed here in a different form for anyone who qualified. "Are you nervous?" Cole asked. "Yes," she said. "I am also prepared. Both things are true." He smiled. That is usually the right combination. She had spent the previous afternoon reviewing every technical manual available in the Vila Public Archive for the station's specific environmental systems models. She was familiar with 3 of the 5 subsystems already from her certification training. The other 2 she had studied for 6 hours. She was not going to walk into that interview unprepared. She also was not going to walk into it performing the particular kind of careful smallness she had learned in the months after her bonding contract was revoked. The way she had gotten used to taking up less space, asking for less, drawing as little attention to herself as possible so that the council would have fewer opportunities to find reasons to take more from her. She was done with that. The interview was conducted by a man named Reg Hooper, who ran the station's systems maintenance division with the cheerful competence of someone who genuinely liked his job. He was broad-shouldered and wore his station uniform slightly untucked, and he asked Zaravel questions that were specific and technical and had correct answers, which she preferred enormously to the evaluative Sorvathi council sessions that had never been about her answers at all. She answered every question accurately. When she did not know something, she described how she would find out and what resources she would use, which Reg seemed to appreciate as much as the answers she had ready. When he asked about her employment history, she described it without omitting the gap and without over-explaining it, because she had decided that the truth was a more stable foundation than a careful construction. "There was a period of inactive status," she said. "It was the result of an administrative ruling by the Sorvathi Settlement Council I was affiliated with. The ruling was not related to professional performance. My technical credentials were unaffected." Reg looked at the credentials on his screen. Level 4 Environmental Systems, Clean Verification. "Yeah, I can see that." He leaned back. "I am going to be direct with you. We have had Sorvathi apply here before and then have the Homeworld Council apply pressure through the diplomatic channel to have employment offers withdrawn. It does not happen often, but it has happened." Zaravel met his eyes. "I am aware that is a possibility. If it happens, the station charter gives me about 30 days of legal maneuvering room. I would fight it, but I want you to know the risk is there." "I know the risk," she said. "I would like the job anyway." Reg nodded slowly. "References from Lucy Graves carry weight here. She has been running rescues in this sector for nearly a decade, and she does not write letters for people she does not mean." He looked at Cole's reference. This one is interesting, very technical, also kind of. He paused. Who wrote this? Cole Navarro. He is a logistics specialist. We survived the colony ship disaster together. Reg read it again quietly. He describes you like someone who was already thinking about the future while the emergency was still happening. I was, she said. Reg closed the files. The posting starts in 6 days. That gives you time to complete onboarding and get through the equipment familiarization. Standard charter employment terms, housing stipend starts at day 1. He stood and offered his hand in the human style. Welcome to the Vila Systems team. Zaravel shook his hand. Human hands were warmer than Sorvathi ones, and the grip was firm and direct and meant as a real thing, not a ceremony. Thank you, she said. She told Cole on the walk back from the interview. He stopped walking for a moment. Then he did something she had come to recognize as one of his more characteristic expressions. A quiet satisfaction, not loud, not performed, the kind that lived in the small muscles around the eyes. I knew they would take you, he said. You could not have known that. I knew you were going to prepare thoroughly and answer every question honestly and not pretend to be smaller than you are. He started walking again. That was always going to be enough. She thought about that as they walked, about the version of herself that had gotten on a colony ship 6 months ago, quietly placed in a bunk she had not been given fairly, going to a new world she had not been wanted on because she had no other option. About the way she had stopped expecting things to go well. About the way she had started evaluating every situation for the exit, the fallback, the minimum viable outcome. She had not done that in the interview. She had walked in and been fully herself, and it had been enough. Cole, she said. Yes. When you go back to work, whatever contract you take next, I would like to maintain contact. She said it plainly because she had learned that plainness was the right language for things she meant. You are the first person in a long time who has treated me as though my circumstances were not the whole of who I am. That is not something I intend to let pass without acknowledgement. Cole was quiet for a moment. I would like that too, he said. For what it is worth, I never thought your circumstances were the whole of who you are. I thought they were just the situation you were in. Who you are was always separate from that. She stopped walking. That is a very Sorvathi thing to say, she said slowly. He looked at her. Is it? We believe that the self and the situation are distinct, that the individual exists separately from what happens to them. She paused. But we do not always act as though we believe it. The council acts as though the situation is the person, as though what has been done to you reflects what you are. She looked at him. You said it as though it were obvious. It is obvious, he said simply. They walked in silence for a little while after that, back through the concourse with its noise and motion and layered smells, and Zaravel thought about the gap between believing something and living as though you believed it, and how a single person could sometimes make that gap visible just by behaving as though it did not exist. Zaravel had been on the Vila Station Systems team for 18 days when the diplomatic notice arrived. She was in sub-level 4, deep in the station's water reclamation loop, recalibrating a filtration array that had been running 2% below optimal for the previous month, and apparently no one had investigated because it had been 2% and not 3%. She found the problem in the secondary valve cluster, a worn seal gasket that was causing micro-fluctuations in pressure, and was finishing the replacement when her station communicator chimed. She read the notice twice. The Sorvathi Collective Diplomatic Office had filed a residence review request with the Vila Station Authority, citing what they called an outstanding administrative obligation connected to her former settlement standing. It was legal language that translated, stripped of its precision, too. They were trying to pull her back. She completed the gasket replacement before she moved. She ran the calibration check. She confirmed the array was back at full operational efficiency and logged it correctly in the system. Then she packed her tools and walked to Reg's office. Reg had already read the notice. He was sitting behind his desk with the look of someone who had expected something like this, and was not happy about being right. 30 days, he said when she came in. Charter gives me 30 days to contest a diplomatic residence review on the grounds of active employment and contractual standing. Your charter protections as a station employee are strong. He pulled up the relevant statute on his screen. I have already contacted the station's legal division. I know you said you would fight it, she said. I want you to know I did not come here to ask you to fix it. I came to tell you I am going to fight it myself, and I want to understand what I am allowed to do within the charter. Reg looked at her for a moment, then turned the screen so she could read it. She read the whole statute. It was detailed and specific and gave her more options than she had expected. As a certified independent settler with active station employment and union standing, she had the right to respond directly to the diplomatic review through the charter appeals process. She did not have to wait for the station to represent her. She could represent herself with support. The union, she said. They have a legal officer. Her name is Marin Liu. She is good. Reg paused. Do you have documentation of your credentials and employment history? Everything. She had kept copies of everything since before the colony launch, out of the same survival instinct that had once made her memorize the layout of the secondary escape bay on a ship she had expected to ride safely to a new world. Then go talk to Marin, he said. And Zaravel, the diplomatic review is a pressure tactic. They are not guaranteed to win it. Your standing here is real and it is documented, and you have done nothing that creates an actual legal basis for recall. I know, she said. I stopped letting them decide what I am worth 3 weeks ago. She met with Marin Liu that afternoon. Marin was 40-something, methodical, and had the particular quality of a person who had spent years making sure that procedural power was used for people who needed it instead of against them. She reviewed everything Zaravel brought in 2 hours, asked sharp questions, and built a clear picture of the situation with the efficiency of someone who had seen similar cases before and knew exactly which parts mattered. The Council's claim rests on what they are calling an outstanding administrative obligation, Marin said. They have not specified what the obligation is, which is procedurally weak. We can compel specification, and if the specification does not match documented fact, the review falls. She looked up. Was there any financial or contractual obligation outstanding when you left? No, the colony ship bunk was a legal entitlement under settlement law. I paid my fees. I held no property in the settlement territory. Then their basis is thin, Marin made a note. I will file for specification within 24 hours. They have 15 days to respond under the charter protocol. If they respond with something real, we address it. If they respond with vague reiteration or do not respond at all, the review is dismissed. Zaravel sat across the desk and felt something she had not associated with administrative processes before: confidence. Not the fragile confidence of hoping for the best, but the grounded kind that comes from understanding the rules of a system that is actually designed to give her a fair chance. File it, she said. She told Cole over a voice call that evening. He was on a freight run out of Vila, 2 days out, hauling medical supplies to a station in the next corridor. His face on the small screen had the same quality in transit that it had everywhere else: present, focused, not performing calm but genuinely at it. He listened to everything. Then he said, "What do you need?" "Nothing specific," she said. "Marin has it handled. I have it handled." She paused. "I wanted to tell someone who would want to know." He looked at her for a moment. "I want to know, always. Then they are going to lose this." "Yes," she said, "I think they are." "How does that feel?" She thought about it honestly. "It feels like something I already knew was true, being confirmed by a process that is finally working the way a process should." Cole nodded slowly. "That is what fairness feels like when you first encounter it. It feels like recognition." She let that sit with her after the call ended. Recognition. Yes. That was the word for it, not receiving something new, but having something true finally be seen correctly by the world around her. The Sorvathi diplomatic office responded to Marin's specification request on day 12. The obligation they cited was a departure fee connected to a settlement infrastructure bond, a fee that, when Marin checked the original settlement records, had been paid in full before the colony's ship launched. Zarevel had the receipt. She had kept every receipt. Marin filed the documented refutation on day 14. The diplomatic review was dismissed on day 16, 2 days before the charter deadline. The dismissal was logged in the official Vila record, which meant it was permanent and public and could not be unlogged by anyone, including the Sorvathi Collective Diplomatic Office. Zarevel read the dismissal notice at the end of her shift, sitting in the sub-level 4 maintenance room with her thermos of hot grain drink. She had developed a genuine preference for the station's version, which was better than the Cardina's run variety, and the quiet hum of the station's systems around her. The filtration array she had repaired on day 18 was still running at full efficiency. The whole sub-level was running clean. She had made that happen, with her hands and her training and the knowledge she had built over years of work. It was not a grand thing. It was a correct and necessary thing, done well, and it mattered to the 4,000 people who lived on this station and drank its water and breathed its air without ever thinking about the maintenance technician 2 levels below who kept the numbers right. She was comfortable with that. She had always been comfortable with necessary work. She was still sitting with the dismissal notice when her communicator showed Cole's ID. She answered. "Dismissed," she said. She heard him exhale. "Good. I paid the infrastructure fee before I ever got on that ship. I kept the receipt." "Of course you did. You sound like you knew I had it." "I assumed you had documentation for everything," he said. "You are extremely thorough." "It is not thoroughness," she said. "It is the habit of someone who has learned not to trust that records will be kept correctly on her behalf." She paused. "I kept the records myself because I stopped trusting others to keep them for me." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That is a hard habit to develop." "Yes, but it was useful." "Are you celebrating?" She looked at the maintenance room around her, at the tools in their rack, at the system status board showing 4 green columns. "I am sitting in a maintenance room drinking hot grain beverage and thinking about what to work on tomorrow." "That sounds like celebrating to you." "It sounds like continuing," she said, "which is what I wanted, not to have a moment, to have a continuing." There was a warmth in his voice when he responded. "Then you have it." She did. She had a job and a housing stipend and union standing, and a legal status that a diplomatic review had just tried and failed to dismantle. She had a colleague named Reg who kept his word, and a legal officer named Marin who knew the charter better than the people trying to use it against her. She had a Dravathi engineer who had written her a reference letter with 3 footnotes, and a freight captain who checked dietary flags before she poured a drink, and a human in a cargo pod who had opened a sealed door because someone was on the other side of it. She had built something from the place where everything had been taken away. She had done it in 18 days and a crisis, and a legal filing and a thermos of hot grain drink. Outside the sub-level viewport, Vila Station was doing what it always did, spinning slowly in the dark between stars. A city that never stopped. 4,000 people living their lives inside a structure that needed constant, careful, skilled attention to stay alive and whole. Zarevel finished her drink, put the thermos in her bag, and checked the next day's maintenance schedule. There was a pressure anomaly in the level 7 oxygen distribution loop that had been logged 3 weeks ago and not yet addressed. It was small, the kind of thing that got deprioritized because it was not urgent yet. The kind of thing that became urgent if no one paid attention. She put her name on it. She would take care of it in the morning. Outside, between the stars, a freight ship was making its slow arc back toward Vila Station, 2 days out, carrying medical supplies, and a logistics specialist who had once opened a door in the middle of a disaster because someone needed him too. He would be back soon. She would tell him about the Level 7 anomaly when he returned, because she had learned that some things were better shared, not because you needed help to carry them, but because sharing the small, important details of a real life was one of the ways you built something worth the name. She had been abandoned by her own people in the middle of a dying ship. She had been given a future by a human who did not think twice. And now, in the quiet and purposeful hum of a station she was learning to keep alive, she was doing the only thing that had ever truly mattered to her. She was building something that would last. That was enough. That was everything.